My next guest is Michael Jennings. Michael has spent over a decade teaching and coaching at nearly every level. He has been a physical education teacher, a strengthophilos org, a healthy body conditioning coach, football coach, youth athletic development trainer, and now program director for PE and character. He's passionate about the powerful role that movement, physical activity, and sport play in the holistic development of young people. He is dedicated to showing that PE, physical activity, and sport build strong foundations in our youth. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk shop a little bit.
Well, I met you at the Teach Better conference in October and went to one of your sessions, which we'll discuss on the podcast today. But I'd like you to start off with telling me a time you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, and that's a tough question. Sometimes maybe a little bit more tricky than one would think to narrow it down to just one time, right? Being in the field of education, there's often times where, our hands are dirty, our boots are dirty, and we're really having to work to try to overcome a challenge, whether it be with a student, with a parent, with an administrator, with a coworker, or whatever the case may be. One that sticks out to me, and I actually reference this a decent amount in some of the talks that I give, was early on in my career as a PE and health teacher. My first year teaching ever, I was at a high school, and I essentially did physical education full time, and it was more or less in the weight room where I had all the the quote unquote athletes and the kids that wanted to be there. I had a great experience. I had an absolutely wonderful time. It's where I really learned that, holy cow, like PE and this space of helping young people is where I want to be. And, everything was going great. In fact, I got to the point and had such a successful year that we ended up fundraising enough money to get a whole new weight room. I actually was voted teacher of the year, and everything was fantastic. And not so long after I, got kind of awarded that recognition, I get called into the principal's office, and I was at a traditional public school. And most people that know about, the public school setting, especially for young educators, especially in bigger school districts, know about kind of the perils of budget cuts and changes and class sizes and things. And lo and behold, I was displaced. I was told that they were reducing the number of courses, or the number of sections, in the physical education department. I actually got hired, in what turned out to be, based on the seniority level, 2 days after a person that was, above me on the totem pole. So next thing I know, I'm out of a job. At the moment, I was told that I was not going to be, there wasn't a place for me at that school, and they were going to see if there's a place for me elsewhere, but they couldn't guarantee anything. And so for a little bit, I didn't have any clue if I was going to have a job the next year, if I was going to have to move, on all sorts of things. Turns out I did get placed into another building in the same district at the middle school level. I really had no desire to teach middle school. Everybody talks about teachers going to middle school to retire, right? It's where all teachers go, because it's crazy, it's topsy-turvy, it's up and down and all over the place. And so my first year at the middle school, I was pretty resentful, to be honest. And didn't have a great year. It wasn't that I had a bad year by any means, but it definitely didn't stack up to my first year. And like I said, I was resentful. I knew that, I liked my coworkers at my old school. I was coaching there, and now I was no longer even coaching at that school. And, so I was coaching elsewhere, and I was frantic all over the place. I was driving across town for this and driving back across town for that, and then living over here. And it was just a very hectic and stressful year. And, to be honest, some of the people that I was teaching with at the time, I didn't even let them in, right? I didn't let them, because I was so resentful of the situation. But ultimately, over time, once I kind of realized, like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I want to do, I can't let this affect me, because if it affects me, it's going to affect the kids. And I knew from my first year that what I wanted to do more than anything else was help these young people to grow and develop the motivation, the competence, and the confidence to be physically active. And that's all I wanted to do. And so what I had to do is kind of just say, hey, let's embrace the situation. Let's embrace the challenge. And ultimately, a couple of things panned out.
Mhm.
I learned to love middle school. In fact,
Mhm.
if I were to go back, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but if I were to go back to the school setting, I would want to be back in the middle school.
Mhm.
That range of sixth grade to eighth grade is fantastic because you can be as goofy and as silly as you want, and the sixth graders still love it. And then you can still have, grown up quote unquote conversations with some of the eighth graders. And it just gives you that kind of spectrum, which is really, really fantastic.
Mhm.
And as soon as I embraced that, everything started to kind of fall back into place. I got really very close with several of my coworkers,
Mhm.
two of which I'm still very close with, one of which is
Mhm.
one of my most near and dear friends, and somebody whom I think is an absolute mentor and somebody that I look up to greatly in the profession. And I still go back to her on a regular basis and asking questions and picking her brain on things. And so ultimately, it turned out to be great. Our department was recognized by the state for being a blue ribbon department in physical education, and that was
Mhm.
fantastic. We just got a lot of things accomplished, a lot of new initiatives and programs, and ultimately, like I said, it really set the tone for me as a professional. And so that was kind of the time that I was in and out of the trenches, I suppose.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I resonate with that is having been a French teacher and budget cuts with electives a lot and displacement or rifts. I mean that's something I've also been a part of, and I get that part of how you felt about being placed in a school you weren't necessarily wanting to be in that level, but yeah, once you kind of shifted your mindset, right, you
Yeah.
learned to love it. So yeah, that really came full circle.
Yeah, and I think it's really a testament to just kind of the power of mindset, right?
Yeah,
And that's really what opened my eyes is like, holy cow, as soon as I just embraced where I was and
yeah,
didn't let the situation dictate me, right? And
yeah.
I could still become me and do the things that I felt was best for the school and for the kids, then I can lean into the situation and I can make these friends and I can learn that, oh, wow, there's a whole crew of teachers here that wanting the same thing I am. And let's use each other. And I think that was just really powerful, especially early on in my career, to be honest.
Hmm. Hmm. So now you're working with the Athos program. So tell me a little bit about the program and your writing that you do for them and some of the curriculum development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear two hats. Ultimately, I work for a um, education service provider called
Hmm.
Athlos Academies, and
Hmm.
where we help schools open up charter schools and help manage them through everything from curriculum, instruction, assessment, finance, HR, the whole gamut. And
Hmm.
I oversee two of the three academic pillars of the charter school model. Those two pillars
Hmm.
are healthy body and performance character. So our model is a three-pillared model where we focus and we believe that we truly teach to the whole child by knowing that the three primary pillars, prepared mind, healthy body, and performance character, are
Hmm.
inextricably linked, and that we can't have ultimate success in a holistic education unless we are teaching to all three of those pillars. So as I mentioned, I oversee two of those pillars, whether it's through observations, walkthroughs, modeling, co-teaching, resource creation, content,
Hmm.
curriculum development, things along those lines. The other hat that I wear is we've actually packaged that program, the performance character aspect and the healthy body aspect, excuse me. And now that's also available to schools and to practitioners, youth sport coaches,
Hmm.
YMCA's, multi-sport organizations across the country. And
Okay.
so that program in itself, because not everybody wants to start a charter school, right? So they're
Hmm.
not going to sit here and say, well, I want to, get the whole kit and caboodle, but I really like the healthy body idea. I really like the performance character idea. How can I implement that? So we packaged that up,
Hmm.
and I oversee that program as well. That's called the Athlos Movement and Character Program.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, with that in mind, ultimately, I'm working with a wide variety of schools I'm oftentimes, trying to keep up with blogs and blog posts and talking about my, adventures of speaking at the Teach Better conference,
Mhm.
or, the day-to-day kind of boots on the ground efforts at the schools, or just best practice or new research or things along those lines.
Mhm.
Um, and so truthfully, I love the role because like I said, I work with a wide swath of schools, whereas oftentimes I'm in a school on the ground with the kids, with the teachers, and sometimes I'm on a virtual call like I am now
Mhm.
with a school supporting them in Jakarta, Indonesia, and
Okay.
all across the country and all across the globe, which is really,
Mhm.
really great and exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like there's many aspects to your job, but you're able to use a lot of your passions in promoting the healthy body, healthy movement mindset, and really get to use all your talents. So sounds like sort of a dream job.
It is pretty great. The old cliche or the old mantra is find something that you love and you never work a day in your life. It's
Uh-huh.
pretty accurate. I really am very fortunate. I get to spend all my days being creative and talking and supporting people in an area that I think is absolutely pivotal to youth success, and that is movement and character development. It's how, like I said before, how can we claim, and many schools do, in fact,
Hmm.
many school districts, many school boards, their slogan, their mantra, their creed, their motto, whatever it says, teaching holistic, or spending time teaching the whole child, or developing holistically educated youth, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, oh, are you like, do you offer daily physical education? No. Okay. Do you offer movement breaks? Do you support
Hmm.
and encourage movement breaks in the classroom? No. Okay. Well, that's another knock. Do you provide recess to all of your students? Do you provide free play opportunities? And no, I'm not just talking about the 6 or 7 minutes after they get done eating at lunch. I'm talking
Hmm.
about daily.
Hmm.
And do you offer character development resources? And I'm not going to talk about necessarily social and emotional learning. I'm talking about specific performance character traits like grit and optimism
Hmm.
and initiative and integrity and creativity. Are you explicit and intentional in those areas? And obviously, as we all know, that's just not the case. And if you're not doing that, you're just
Hmm.
providing lip service
Yeah.
to your constituents, to your stakeholders. And that to me is an absolute travesty. So when I get to share this message and get to talk to people that feel the same way, I just get, as you can tell, very excited and very, very eager to talk about it.
Hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about what are your sessions that you provide. The breakout session I attended was the best education you never knew you had. So it talks about neurotropic factor in the brain, what it transmits during physical activity. So talk a little bit about some of the research findings, and it's kind of a snapshot of what that session's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the session that you're discussing was one that I really like, and as you know, I get excited about, and it's um, I've kind of dubbed it as the best educational tool you never knew you had. And so
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, oftentimes when we think about trying to teach kids and get them to learn things and get them to develop as young people, we're talking about educational strategies, and whether it's, project-based learning or standards-based grading, or,
Hmm.
inquiry-derived instruction or things like that. That's all fine and good, but for me, there's no more powerful tool. And this is from my anecdotal experience, and this is what the research is saying. And by no means am I the genius that's doing all of this research,
Hmm.
but this is what the research is saying, is that movement and physical activity and exercise, sport participation and play participation are the best things to help a young person, or adult for that matter,
Hmm.
learn.
Hmm.
And so I talk about in my session a lot of great resources, whether it's Dr. John Rady's book Spark, or Dr. Carly Hannaford's book Smart Moves. There's all sorts of great information and resources out there. I share it's like a slide and a half worth of articles and research papers and things at the end of my session that goes through and talks about how we can see not only positives in academic growth from a standpoint of GPA, standardized test scores, the numbers of advanced placement courses high school kids take, or even to IQ tests that are taken, we can see that those types of things skyrocket and go through the roof with increased physical activity. With the more fit a person is, like cardiovascularly fit a person is, the better they tend to do in these types of tests. So not only in those academic fields, but we also see a huge benefit for the emotional side of things as well, for emotional regulation, for self-advocacy, for self-efficacy, self-esteem, all these things that we know are so important for students' success. We see an increase in all of those as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on the behavioral side, we talk about how kids can focus longer, how studies are showing that there's a double-digit % decrease in time spent on off-task behavior when kids are active before the lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that and we can get these benefits in as few as 5 minutes, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing the targeted approach, we know that specific movements and specific activities do different things in the brain, whether it's resistance training like lifting weights, or going out for a walk, or doing yoga, having different effects in different areas of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Something you mentioned prior to kind of me going off on my little rant here was a substance called brain derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
Mm-hmm.
And so this phrase was coined by Dr. John Rady in his book Spark. And he says, where BDNF is like miracle grow for the brain.
Okay.
Meaning when we exercise and when we are active, our brain secretes this BDNF chemical, this neurotransmitter. And what Miracle Grow does, if you put it on, your garden, or you put it on your yard, it's like fertilizer, right? It helps everything grow robust and thick and fast and sturdy and strong. And that's what BDNF does for our neurochemistry, right? So our brain is made up of these neurons, our whole nervous system, our central nervous system, right? These neurons that are specific to the nervous system, and they each are connected, right? This is a kind of the 1 million foot view of how our brains work, but they're each connected. And when we want to learn something, there's more and more of those connections being made. When we want to learn how to move, right? If we are learning how to skip for the first time, it's no different. Those same types of connections need to be made. And then if we're learning how to do math or learning how to read, more and more connections are being made. BDNF promotes those connections, and it strengthens the connections that are already there. So something that I used in my session was that a slide of we were up in the foothills over here, right outside of my house in Boise, Idaho, and big, tall grass hills, very gorgeous. And there's no path anywhere. And you can just see for miles, but it's just these mountains, right? And I say, okay, if we wanted to walk from here to those mountains over there, it would be tough. We could do it, right? But we have to be picking up our feet and sludging through tall grass and over bushes and shrubs and all this stuff. But over time, with BDNF, what happens is we can wear a path more easily through. And then I flash to another picture where now there's a trail that's very well aligned and very easy to navigate and very easy to go through. And now we say, well, if we wanted to get from here to there now, it's really simple, because we can just stay on this trail. We can even drag our feet if we want to, because there's nothing getting in our way. So what exercise does, what physical activity and play does, whether it's through recess, physical education, exercise before or after school, sport team participation, or movement breaks in the classroom, it promotes the production of that BDNF to give us that pathway to solidify our learning, right? To solidify the things that our teachers are trying to get us to kind of maintain, whether it's, like I said before, reading, math, skipping, a science concept, dates, facts, things along those lines. So like I said, that's a lot. If anybody's out here that is, a neurobiologist or a neurochemist or something, I'm sure they're just cringing at my explanation. But to me, that's how it's always made the most sense, and how I've been able to kind of get it out to people. So
yeah, and I remember well that image that you gave, and I think it also is helpful for students who have that overwhelm factor when they get an assignment, right? If they're having more physical activity, then maybe this overwhelming assignment won't seem as overwhelming because of those
Absolutely.
transmitters. Okay.
Absolutely. And not only so from that standpoint, there are more neurotransmitters and more kind of substances that are being produced and secreted in the
Mhm.
brain that during physical activity, things like dopamine and serotonin and noradrenaline and norepinephrine and all sorts of things, right, that have a direct play on those same things, those
Mhm.
anxiety levels. So even if even if we take away the BDNF and we take away that kind of miracle grow for the brain,
Mhm.
we still have chemicals that are being secreted that actually calm us down, that
Yeah.
actually take us down a step from an anxiety standpoint and can act as an anti-anxiety or anti-even depressive
Mhm.
kind of medication. One of the charts that I put up there, I paired with one of the conclusion statement, and I'm paraphrasing here, but
Mhm.
ultimately it said, in conclusion, regular physical activity is as effective as pharmaceuticals for reducing is at least as effective at reducing anxiety and depressive symptoms in people as pharmaceuticals. So what
Mhm.
that means is that this group of people, this group of researchers in their study found that physical activity and exercise are as effective at minimum as something that's prescribed by a doctor to treat anxiety or depression, which is
Mhm.
absolutely mind blowing to me, right? That's
Mhm.
something that we have this powerful tool at our disposal, which goes back to what you said before about, hey, if a kid's really anxious about a big test or an assignment, what better way to calm those nerves than going for a walk? Right? What
Mhm.
better way to calm those nerves than doing some type of physical activity or play prior to an assignment or prior to a learning endeavor? One of the things that I talk about a lot with schools is if you're going to do a information dense session,
Mhm.
whether it's a lecture or a PowerPoint, or you're just giving out a lot of information for 5, 6, 7, 12, 20, 25 minutes, whatever the case may
Mhm.
be,
Mhm.
the first thing you should do is prime the brain for learning. And how do you do
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
Get the kids standing up, go for a
Mhm.
5 minute walk, do a couple of jumping jacks, do some air squats, do some high knees. There's all sorts of things just to get the kids moving. And that will
Mhm.
help them retain, it'll help them calm their nerves, it'll help them focus more, it'll detract from misbehavior, and it will help them retain the information that you're trying to give better than just going in cold.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good idea for people. It doesn't take you long, and it's just you want those kids to be able to focus on learning. But yeah, if they're just going from class to class, sitting in seats the whole time, that is prime target for misbehavior, right? So
Absolutely.
a thing that we talked about when I was in that breakout session, a lot of people, they know this, but then it's hard to like actually get this going at their school. What would you advise somebody who would maybe want to start a task force at their school or in their district, or even do a presentation to their school board about like ways that they can build more types of physical activity into the school day, such as like during an advisory period, during an intervention period? How would you maybe make some suggestions about scheduling it secondary? Because a lot of the time it's in that elementary school day. They have extra time for SEL, they have extra time for recess, 2 recesses often, but not at the secondary level.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the first two things kind of jump out as what to do first, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the one of those two, and these can be in any real order. Um, Try it yourself
Mm-hmm.
first. Find a class,
Yeah.
and just do it and see what happens.
Okay.
Do it for 3 weeks. Do it for 4 weeks. Whatever the case may be. 5 minutes a day, and just see if you can tell a difference. And my guess is you're going to tell a major difference very quickly, and it's going to be unmistakable. Another thing you can do, maybe this is 1A or whatever, like I said, either
Mm-hmm.
one, gather, find, gather, and reference the research. It's
Mm-hmm.
out there and it's very easy to come across. If for whatever the reason you're struggling, please reach out to me directly and I will get you anything and everything that I have. I'm an open book. I happily share kind of information and knowledge as much as I
Mm-hmm.
possibly can, because once you have those, I kind of call it like arrows in the quiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you
Mm-hmm.
have those arrows in the quiver, you're ready to shoot them off when you need to.
Okay.
And you can, and when somebody asks, like, what are you doing? Like, you're taking away from instructional time. You can say, oh, here's an arrow from my quiver, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
no
Mm-hmm.
research anywhere in the world that proves that more classroom time gives better academic results. None.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, boom, easy. Well, what about you? Don't you need to cover your content? Well, here's another quiver, right? If my class is misbehaving a lot, they're talkative,
Mm-hmm.
they're off task, they're out of focus. If my kids participate in physical activity, there's at least a double digit percent chance that I'm going to be decreasing my time spent with misbehavior, which then increases my overall time spent with academics. So you
Mm-hmm.
have this ability to kind of fire these things off in
Mm-hmm.
responses to
Mm-hmm.
why are you doing this? And most of the time, in my opinion, most of the time, the the first major hurdle for any change is people grasping the idea of why. If they
Mm-hmm.
don't know why, or if they don't believe in the why you're doing something or why we're trying to do something, then there's never going to be any conversation about the who, the what, the when, or the how.
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe that. So if you can come with research, with data, with information, plus your own kind of anecdotal evidence, okay, now you're going to say, oh wow, you know what? Your teacher, your co-teacher down the hall, or your team teacher, whoever it is like, wow, I've really needed to. I'm struggling with sixth hour.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do? I'm at wit's end, and then you can say, hey, try this stuff out. It's been working for me, and now there's two of you, and then next thing
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's three, and then six, and then whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
From a task force standpoint, to me, this is like if you can take the information that you gathered and some of your anecdotal evidence, and you take it to your assistant principal or dean or whomever in your school, and you say, hey, this is something that I've noticed. I would really like to see if anybody's willing to kind of dive in and try
Mm-hmm.
some type of formalized approach to this to give our students more opportunities for success or more
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to be successful. My guess would be, if you have those arrows in your quiver
Mm-hmm.
and you approach it to the standpoint of, this has been working for me, and I want to find ways to give our students more opportunities for success, my guess would be your principal, your assistant principal would probably be on board with at least sitting down and having the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because 99% of the time, principals and administrators are not going to say no to
Mm-hmm.
something that is going to help students,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? If they do, there's bigger fish at play that we need to try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then something I was wondering for teachers who teach those core subjects, like social studies, math, science, um, what do they do? If they have these targets or these the whole team teaches this lesson this day and they feel like they have to cover a certain amount. And maybe you have some naysayers in your team. Like you said, it's gathering the research, it's showing the evidence, but there may be a younger teacher in the bunch who's like, I want to, do like the other people. I don't want to get in trouble. So what would you say to somebody like that who feels like, okay, I need to cover a certain amount per day?
Well, my question to them immediately is, if you feel like you need to cover a certain amount per day, what
Mm-hmm.
happens
Mm-hmm.
when kids don't learn
Mm-hmm.
what you're trying to cover? Do you just
Yeah.
go on and leave them behind? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't like necessarily, and maybe this is a little bit of a cop out to the question, so I apologize, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like the questions, and I don't really give too much time to the questions of, well, I've got to get this covered. It's
Yeah.
because, sure, you may want to get it covered, and it may be necessary for your pacing guide and your scope and sequence and your curriculum, your cross school curriculum, or whatever, vertical or horizontal alignment. But if they don't grasp that content, do you
Mm-hmm.
just move on because you
Mm-hmm.
just said that you have to get to this and you have to get to that?
Yeah.
So if you're just passing over kids that might not get it, well then, and you're okay with that, well, then this conversation is going to be lost on you anyways.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm going to
mm-hmm.
let you keep doing your thing until somebody else comes and fixes it. Because right now we're talking about how can we get more movement in the school day to help our kids be successful, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, so then what I say is, sure, if we have a lot of content to get to,
Yeah.
and I spend, let's say I have a 45-minute class period,
Mm-hmm.
and I spend 2 minutes at the beginning just getting attendance done and all this stuff. And then I spend 2 minutes at the end of class, getting kind of just talking and doing whatever. Okay, now I'm down to 41 minutes and I've got to get all this stuff. Okay, I got to pass out papers. That takes another minute. I got to get kids to get their laptops out. That takes another couple minutes. Plus, this whole time, while kids are getting their laptops out, while I'm passing out papers, while I'm taking attendance, kids are talking and I'm trying to get them to be quiet at the same time. So
Yeah.
every one of these 1 to 2 minute segments ends up being 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And now I'm cutting out a lot of time from my education or what I can be doing, not my education, excuse me, my instruction.
Yeah.
And so what I can say is if I'm struggling in these little areas, I can kind of right the ship by having a system and a structure in place that says, hey, this is what we do at this time, and this is when we get our movement in. Or if I can tell that kids are kind of getting off subject or getting off topic when we're talking and doing a group discussion, or if I am lecturing or I am going over a PowerPoint and I can tell that, hey, I got a lot of kind of glazed over faces. Rather than saying, do you understand? Do you understand? Do you understand? I can just say, okay, put your stuff down, stand up. We're going to play a game of silent ball. Put your stuff down, stand up. We're going to do, jumping jack flashcards
Yeah.
or, whatever kind of fun and hokey thing you want to do. But just to get them moving and get the blood flowing, kind of get their heart rate up a little bit, or just get some coordinative abilities going, whether it's catching or throwing or, tossing a wad of paper into the trash can or, whatever the case may be. There's the possibilities are seemingly endless, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can say, okay, I'm using instructional time. Like my instructional time is sacred. Yes, just like yours is sacred. But I'm using my instructional time to prime some of my instructional time to prime my kids to actually learn.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
might do some elaborate, like I've been around teachers that like dress up in costumes to get their kids hooked on a content, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. If that works for you, that's your instructional strategy. Mine is I'm going to spend that same amount of time moving, playing a
Mm-hmm.
game, right?
Yeah.
Getting kids jumping around and doing things like that. So that's kind of, again, a long-winded approach to talking to teachers that are asking those kind of naysayer questions. The other thing that I do for that is
Mm-hmm.
I tell this to everybody, go after the low-hanging fruit,
Yeah.
right? The early adopters, the ones that are going, yeah, sure, heck with it. I'll try anything. Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
try. New is fun. Awesome. Let's go. Go after those people. And kind of the analogy that I use is if you don't pick the low hanging fruit early
Mm-hmm.
and you leave it on the vine or you leave it on the branch, you leave it on the tree, eventually that vine, that branch, that tree grows taller and taller and taller, and that fruit gets out of reach.
Yeah.
And as soon as it gets out of reach, there's no coming back because up there, even if you can put a ladder to it and pick it, it's probably spoiled. It's probably got worms in it. It's probably moldy. It's probably gross, right? So we want to go after the low hanging fruit ASAP because eventually, if we don't pick it, it gets spoiled and we can't. There's no coming back. There's no saving it. And
Mm-hmm.
once we get
Mm-hmm.
enough of those low hanging fruit, those early adopters on, then it's almost like an adult peer pressure thing where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is doing it, so you're either in or you're out type deal for
Yeah.
some big kids.
Yeah. 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 And that's a good way to look at it. Like, try to get as many people on board as you can. Right. And then, kind of change that mindset, at least in your hallway, in your team, and see like the results. They will show. Right. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
we talked about some blogs that you have written. You said that you were in the process of writing one about getting out of your silo in presenting at conferences that may not be your subject area.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about your
So
thoughts on that.
yeah. So as you mentioned, as we both kind of talked about, I did present at the Teach Better conference. And to be honest, I was just thrilled to be even in attendance at the Teach Better conference. And I wasn't, although all that sure about what it would be like. Coming from the physical education world, the health world, the strength conditioning, the sport coaching world, most of the conferences that I attend and or speak at are kind of geared along those same lines, whether it's the National Strength and Conditioning Association, the state associations of health, physical education, recreation, and dance, or just different kind of national, international things that I've done have all been in that same kind of lane. Whereas the Teach Better conference, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident that I'd say I'm 99% sure that I was the only physical education person in the entire conference or at the entire conference, not even a presenter, just even in attendance. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to get out of it. And to be honest, I took home a ton. I even used some of it in a professional development session that I did for one of our schools a couple of weeks ago. And it was absolutely fantastic. And the more I think about it, the more I think, education in general probably needs to do a better job of getting out of our silos. And getting out of this, oh, you're a math teacher, so you can only listen to other math teachers, or oh, you're a PE teacher and you don't even pay attention in professional developments, right? Like and there's these stigmas and these stereotypes with all different kind of realms. Oh, you're just a business guy, right? You're the business teacher and you just do keyboarding, or you're the science teacher and all you get to do is you get to play and light things on fire all day, right? There's these different stereotypes. But ultimately, what it comes down to is relationships, routines, procedures, new ideas, getting outside of your comfort zone from time to time, and finding ways, just because we all have to find ways to motivate young people to learn. And sometimes that's easy. Sometimes that's really, really tough. Some kids love math. Some kids don't want to ever go to a math class again after 7th grade, right? Like you have this, just like in the PE world. Some kids really, really love PE. And if you read anything on, social media and some of these newspapers that are posting things from adults' perspective, adults hated PE, right? You hear a lot of horror stories about these terrible, terrible experiences that these people had in PE. And so we're all trying to find ways to be innovative and grow. And I think there's a lot more consistency and commonalities across subjects than we like to give it credit for. And so that was really positive for me, is to kind of recognize that and to kind of learn from that and grow from that and take some of the things, some strategies that a math teacher might use and then put them into a physical education class. And, some physical education classes have 40, 50, 60 and up kids per class. And so it's like, okay, we're controlling chaos and still trying to teach and still have our standards and our learning targets and things along those lines. Here's how we do it in a big group session. So when you get a large class for math and you have, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with 32 kids in the classroom? Here are some strategies, right? And so there's a lot that we can glean from one another. And I'm doing my best to kind of put that into words to share and try to promote the idea of get out there, go. Just because it's a quote unquote academic conference and you're a PE teacher or you're a choir teacher or you're a business teacher, go to it, get there, right? And see and learn and expand your horizons, because the more we spend in this little silo and this echo chamber, we just keep saying the same things over and over and over again. And are we really moving the needle? Are we really doing anything different? Are we really pushing the envelope? Most of the time, no.
Yeah. Something to ponder and think about for those who are wanting to get out there and research what conferences are available in their region or nationally. I've seen a lot of postings recently about not only Teach Better, but other conferences that are going on. And I think people are really picking up on, the enjoyment of networking and seeing people and learning at the in-person conferences. So we had a great conversation today on your philosophy and some of the research that you've put into your presentation and also your work, excuse me, out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Oh, I think that movement in the day, movement throughout the day, not only is it beneficial for the students, but it's beneficial for you as the teacher and as the adult and as the professional. But ultimately, movement and physical activity, free play, those are not taking away from instructional time. That is instructional time.
Yeah.
Movement is education. Movement is instruction. And so when we start thinking about this, I hope and I encourage you all the listeners to think of it from a lens of movement is instruction. So just because, I might not be saying, putting up on the marker board 2 + 2 = 4, right? Just because I'm not doing that doesn't mean that the activities and the things that I'm doing aren't instructional practices, right? We talk about this a lot. We talked about it earlier, reading a book, reading a passage, reading a worksheet. Okay. All those are different varieties of trying to help kids learn how to read. What if we just took 4 minutes away from one of those things to do some type of movement and physical activity and then had them do it, right? It doesn't take long. It's not, it's not like it's erasing your class. It's not knocking your content. Movement is instruction. And I just wish that more people, and I hope that over time, more people recognize the inherent and quite frankly, proven information that we have that says that how important movement is to our day.
Where can people connect with you, find you online, and read some of your blog posts?
Yeah, so the blog posts are all in the blog or Athlos blog. So if you go to AMAC, that's amac.athlos.org. You can find everything there. You can access our program. There's a lot of really great free content on there for, like I said, teachers, coaches, parents, even. We have a bunch of people using it for a variety of different reasons. I hope you go check us out. You can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at Athlos Mac. And then I'm also on Twitter. My personal account is the Schmike. That's TheSchmike. And then email. My email address is mjennings@athlos.org. That's probably the easiest way to contact me directly. I respond pretty quickly. Like I said, I like to be an open book and to share the information that I have. I would gladly talk shop with anybody around kind of strategies and ideas and thought processes and anything in between. So I really hope that, you reach out.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.